this is Mickey. Hope everybody's doing well. Today's session, we are going to be talking about intersecting masks. Now, a lot of people think this is a complicated process, or they just don't understand how intersecting mask works, which is really a shame because it's one of the more powerful features of masking, which really let us specifically design to affect very specific areas of your photograph, and really lets us design how we want light to come in and how we want to affect color just in very specific areas of the photograph. So on the very basic level, what an intersection mask is applying a mask in one area and then applying an intersecting mask, and only where that intersecting mask covers the primary mask area is where the effect is applied. Now, that might be a little confusing, so let me show you exactly what I'm talking about here. So we're going to put a radial mask in place in the grass here, and we're going to draw it with no feather, and we're really going to crank up the exposure so we can see where the mask is applied. So here's our primary mask. So when we're describing intersection masks, it's basically two questions that I want to ask when I'm doing this. The first is where. Where in my photograph do I want to make a change in exposure or color? So this is where I want to do it. The next question is what. What part of this mask do I want to affect with an intersecting mask? So let's draw an intersecting mask now. To do that, we're going to click on these three dots and we get intersection with. You can also hold your Alt or Option key down and it turns the Add Subtract into Intersect, and we can click on that and do the same thing. And with this intersect, we want to choose another radial gradient. So what we're saying is that I want to intersect my primary mask with a radial mask. Now, you also notice that when we drew our intersecting mask, the area affected by our primary goes away. And that is because there is no intersecting area yet. Remember what I said, is that only the areas where these two masks intersect, where they have the common area, will the effect be applied. So to demonstrate that, let's grab the pen on our intersecting mask and let's start dragging it over to our primary mask. And there you see it. The only time we see our effect is when both of these masks have an area in common. And right now, it's this half of the radial from the primary mask. And you can just move it around and cover any area that you want. That's what makes it so powerful, is that once you have your primary mask in place, your secondary or your intersecting mask can be moved to bring into effect any part of that primary mask. All right, so now that we understand that basic concept, let's clear this masking area here. We'll delete all masks. I'm going to show you how we put this into effect. I'm going to show you several different methods. But more importantly, there are hundreds of ways to use intersection masks. You're only limited by your imagination. And just because I do it one way doesn't make it right or the way to do it. It just means that this is the way that I like to do it. I challenge you to use this intersection technique and try it on all kinds of things. I'm just going to give you some basics, and I'm going to let you run from there and see how well you can do with it. In this photograph, I want to enhance the sky. I want to leave my clouds alone, and I only want to affect the blueness of the sky. Make it a little darker, maybe give it a little more light to make it, the bright fall day that it was. So the first thing we do, we have to put our where down. Where do we want to affect? We want to affect the sky. So we're going to use a sky mask. And as you can see, the overlay has affected the whole sky. But remember, we only want to affect the blue with this mask. So what we're going to do, we're going to go up here to these three dots. We're going to click it, and we're going to choose Intersection Mask With. And we want to intersect it by color, because we want to specifically tell the system this is the only color I want to affect. So we're going to intersect with a color range mask, and then we're going to click on the color that we want to affect. Now, the overlay, if it's kind of strong and you can't see the color you really want to click on, you can always click on Show Overlay, or the shortcut key is O. So when I click O, it turns off the overlay. My mask is still in effect, but the overlay is off. So I want to click on a blue that represents the area of the sky that I'm working on. Now when I click once, it's only going to affect that blue underneath that single click. All right, so when I do that, you can see now it has masked a large part of the sky and left out some of the clouds. And we can refine that, but let me show you something else first. Let's get rid of that one selection, and we're going to go again, intersect with color range, only this time I want you to hold the mouse button down and draw a square like this. Now when you're doing that, you're saying, I don't want a specific color, I want the average color of blue that falls within this square that I drew. And as you can see, we have a little better, more clouds are defined in this. But we still have to refine it. So let me show how we refine this, because all we want is the red to be in the blue area. We want the clouds to be as white as we can make them so they will not be affected by the changes that we put in place. So we come over here to the refine slider, and as we move it to the left, you can see the clouds start to brighten up and the red goes away. And that's because we're telling Lightroom, I don't want these clouds to be masked. Now there's a shortcut to this too. When you're using the refinement slider, if you hold your Option key down or Alt on a PC and start sliding, we now get a luminance mask. All right, so white reveals, black conceals. So anything that's white or shades of white will be affected, and anything that's black will not be affected. So at this point, what we're trying to do is to find the happy middle ground where we can make our clouds as black as possible, as well as the foreground, and leave our sky as white as we can. So I'm going to say that's about as good as we're going to get right there. All right, so we still have some area up here that is not the same color blue as this area, and we'll just see how that turns out. So now that we have everything masked, what we want to do is grab our exposure. We want to bring this down just a little bit. And let's bring the whites up a little bit to make it shine. And just for the sake of the video, we're going to call this good. All right. So this allows us to mask the sky and only affect the blue parts of the sky. That's our intersection. Remember, our where was sky and our what was the blue color in the sky. So that's why we used a color range mask. All right. Now let's get a little more specific in the areas that we want to change. And we're going to stick with this picture, and what we're going to change now is you can see that the sun is coming in from the right and it's touching these points of this tree line that were jutting out a little further. It's kind of a jagged tree line, so we have dark shadows, but we have this, and we want to enhance this light area right here specifically. Now we can choose this in several different ways, but I have found that when we use the object selection tool, we're going to create a new mask and choose objects. Object selection goes on color and luminance. So because we have a big change in luminance in this area, we'll probably be able to mask this out with our object selection tool pretty easy. So I'm just going to draw around this area very roughly. Let go. And there we have it. We have a pretty good mask. If I turn the exposure up a little bit, you can see that we've masked that area, so we're not affecting the shadows, but it's not as clean as I would like it. So I've shown this in my other videos, but we're going to clean this up real quick. So to clean up this area, what we're going to do is that we're going to go up here to subtract, and we're going to choose brush. We're going to make sure that auto mask is on and that flow and density and feather is set 100, 100, 100. Remembering that when the auto mask is on, it's going to take away any color that is similar to the color that my minus mark and my brush is resting on. So if I click right here, everything within the circle of my mask is going to take away the blue sky or the clouds. So I'll click here and it takes it away. I'll click here, cleans up there. Let's click right here, cleans up here, here, and here. All right, so now we have a pretty good mask of the sky, of the tree line. Now what I also want to do at this point is I want to ease the transition between these shadows of this tree line, because as we apply changes, I want the light to come in by graduations instead of a really harsh line. So I'm going to turn the show the overlay on, and I want to add to the mask now. So I'm going to click Add, and I'm going to select Brush. I'm going to turn off Auto Mask, and I'm going to turn the flow way down to about 50%. Now what I want to do is I just want to have my main part of the brush in the red area, and I'm just going to paint like this around the edges, so it just puts a very faint area beyond the line of the trees, and that kind of eases the transition between light and dark. So I'm keeping my brush on the bright red area while I'm letting the feathered edge of my brush go in and update that tree line. So now it doesn't look as harsh as it moves from light until dark. Now we have that in place. Let's concentrate on our intersection. I'm going to zoom out here just a little bit, and I'm going to use the intersection with the radial mask. So we applied our where with our object tool, and now our what we're going to use our radial. So we're going to go to our 3 lines here, 3 dots, and we're going to intersect with our radial gradient. And I'm going to draw a radial gradient about this size, and I'm going to move it with my feather at 100%. So I'm going to change my feather all the way to 100%, and I'm going to drag this down to the area of my mask that I want to affect, and I'm going to put it kind of in an orientation of where the sun's coming from. Now as you can see, the mask, when I hover over it, it degrades from the center. So the brightest part is in the center, and light falls off as it moves to either side. And that's why we want to use the radial mask, because as light comes in from the sun, it's brightest at its source, and it diminishes as it moves across the scene. And that's what we're going to try to mimic. You know, using just a regular mask like we did here, all that is doing is showing us, you know, very specifically where we want to make the change. And if we change the exposure, it'll be the same across all the area, and we don't want that. We want it to be a degradation of light. So it starts bright at one end and gets darker at the other. So we widen up our mask like this, and now let's turn the overlay off. Now as you can see, the light is not as bright as it comes across if we had just increased the exposure from the original object mask. And we can change our exposure some here, just like this. And as you notice, the changes that we make, it's only affecting the area that the masks intersect. So nothing is going into the sky, even though if we look at the overlay, you know, we see of the original mask, we see that it's in the sky, but because we put the intersect in place, it only affects the light here on the trees. So let me turn the overlay off, and let me show you what's just the best part of this. Now once we have the effect in place, let's say we have our exposure up, we can bring the shadows up a little bit, we'll even juice up the color a little bit, just like this. Maybe throw some magenta in to maybe make the highlights of the browns a little better. And we'll zoom in a little closer so you can see this effect. All right, so here's our intersecting mask that's bringing in the light. If I don't like the way it looks at this point, I can grab this mask and start moving it around. And see when I do, the light changes. I can move it till I get it exactly like I want the light to fall across this part of the scene. And that's the power of the intersection mask, is that you're not just stuck with a radial mask that just throws a lot of light in one area and not in the other areas you want. So remember, 100% of the light starts at this dot and moves to the left and moves to the right. And since we have the intersecting mask, even though the mask covers this whole area here, the only place we see the effect is where it intersects with our object mask. Now I just move my radial gradient around till I get just the amount of light that I want, and release my dot, and there is my radial gradient intersection. And if we go up here and we look at the mask, without the mask, with the mask, without the mask. Now here's something more important. Let's turn off just the intersection and show you what it looked like without an intersection. There's without the intersection mask, there's with the intersection. So not only by turning the whole mask off, you know, it's nice color, but it's still not got the light that we want it to have. with our intersecting mask and our primary mask, we get a good color change. But what makes it real important is that because we threw the intersection mask on it, this is what it looked like, just plain old putting a object selection mask on and tweaking our exposure. But we throw the radial on it, intersection, and that's what we get. Much better light effect and a much better effect overall on our tree line. All right, now let me go through another example. You're saying, Mickey, sure, we can do landscapes, but can we do people with intersections? Of course we can. So here we're looking at an on-plane air event, and she's kind of shadowed with her hat on, but we can still bring in some light and let her face shine through some of these shadows. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to go up here, and I want to put a radial mask in, because I want to bring some light to her face. So I am going to draw a radial gradient and feather 100%, hover near the end here so I can rotate it upwards, and I'm going to shoot the light underneath her hat up to her face. So this is the area that I want to affect. This is my where. Now the what is going to be her actual face, not the hat, not the shirt, not the background. I want to affect her face. So to do that, we're going to intersect with an object mask. So we're going to intersect with objects, and we're just going to roughly draw around the hat over her skin area of the face. And as we do that, you can see now the mask is only on her face, nothing on the hat, nothing on the shirt, nothing on the background. And now let's make the effect. So let's bring the light up a little bit, about like this. Let's bring the shadows in. And you see how good the light is? We're actually seeing the light as it comes through her hat. And that's just another effect that we couldn't have brought out by just using exposure. Now, once we have everything into effect, and let's give her skin just a little glow to it since the afternoon sun is hitting it. So we'll just bring that up a little bit. Now, if I think my settings are correct, I'll bring it up just a little bit to show you. Now we can grab our radial gradient and start moving it around to decide, is this the right way I want to affect her face? So let's bring a little more light to the cheek area and let more fall off as it goes across the face so it looks kind of realistic. And we'll take a look at that. So here's before, after, before, after. And if you still think it's too bright, you have your amount slider here, and we just bring the amount slider down until it gives you a more realistic effect. So if we look at the mask as a whole with the intersection, this is before, this is after, before, and after. Let me show you what it would look like without the intersection. So we see her shirt lit up, the hat's lit up, the background's lit up. So everything's lit up and her face is exposed correctly, but we don't want that. So the intersection allows us only to affect the face. That's our what. The where would be the whole area around her face and her body. The what of the intersect would be her face. Good way to bring a little light to a subject that, because of the big dynamic range, you just couldn't get enough light on the face. Okay, let's do one more quick demo. In this one, we're going to use select subject to select our where, which is the pony, and our what will be the light areas of the pony that we want to accentuate. And that we'll be doing with our brush tool. So the first thing we want to do is select our where, and we're going to use the select subject. And as you can see, it's done a really good job of selecting the pony. Now we want to make some exposure changes because we want to highlight the pony. Don't worry about highlighting too much of the pony, because remember, the only place the effect is going to be applied is where we brush with our brush tool. So I would just like to get the areas in here where the sun is the brightest as it comes across the horse. I want to turn up the exposure to get those about where I want them to be. Next we want to do is intersect with a brush. And we want to make sure that our flow is set at about 60 to 65% with 100% feather, and we're going to make our brush size about this big right here. Now, you see we have the effect over the whole horse or the whole pony right now, but as soon as we click anywhere on the photograph with our intersecting brush tool, the effect is going to go away. At that point, we're going to use our brush and lightly paint on those areas that we want the sun to shine through. So I'm going to click right over here in the blue sky, And when I do, you see everything goes away. Now, all I'm going to do is paint in those areas that I want the sun to come back. So I'll paint on the mane a little bit here, and I'm going to paint a little bit here and here, down here, on the back part of the pony, on the tail, and the hindquarters here, a little bit on this leg, a little bit down the leg, a little bit more on the face. So as you can see, as I paint with my brush, I'm only affecting those areas where I want the light to shine through. I can paint anywhere else on this picture, in the sky, in the sand. It doesn't affect it because, remember, it's an intersection. So only where the masks intersect, which would only be on the pony, is the effect applied. So if we look at the mask entirely, before, after, before, and after, we can see we have used the primary mask, the where, and the what was where the sun was hitting the horse. Now if we turn off the intersection, you can see the whole horse is lit up, and the shadows aren't quite as strong, and that's what makes the horse stand out so well. It does have strong shadows. So that's with the intersection, that's without the intersection. That is with the intersection. This is before and after. So you get a much better realistic look of how the sun comes across this pony as we paint in the light that we want the pony to have from our changes in exposure. Well, I hope this helps you out. If you have any questions about masking or about intersecting masking, please shoot me an email and I'll be glad to help you out. I'll talk to you all soon.